Welcome back to the Tech 101 podcast. Today we're going to dive into a fascinating topic, how chatbots actually work. But instead of just skimming the surface, we're going to explore how chatbots have evolved from their early beginnings, how they operate today with a mix of simple explanations and math, and how they learn from interacting with you. We'll make sure it's all explained in a way that's engaging, easy to understand, and a bit technical for those of you who enjoy going deep into how things really work. So let's start with a bit of history. If you've ever wondered where chatbots originated, you'd be surprised to know that their story begins way back in 1966 with a program called ELIZA. ELIZA was developed by Joseph Weizenbaum at MIT, and while it's miles away from what we have now, it was groundbreaking for its time. ELIZA didn't understand what you were saying, far from it. It simply looked for keywords in what you typed and spat out pre-written responses based on those keywords. For example, if you said, "I feel sad," ELIZA might respond with, "Why do you feel sad?" It felt like you were talking to something that kind of got you, but in reality it was just a set of scripts, not much smarter than a digital parrot. It was basic, but it laid the groundwork for what we see in today's advanced AI chatbots, like ChatGPT and Gemini. These modern chatbots are in a whole different league because they don't just repeat pre-written lines. They can understand context, adapt to what you're saying, and even generate unique responses that make you feel like you're chatting with someone intelligent. But how do they do this? Let's break it down, step by step. Think of it like this. Imagine you walk into a cafe and tell the barista, "I'd like an iced coffee, please." The barista immediately understands what you want based on a few key words: iced, coffee, and maybe even please. They don't need you to explain in detail that you want it cold or with ice. They get it from context. This is similar to how chatbots work. When you type something like, "What's the weather like today?" the chatbot isn't necessarily thinking deeply about every word. It picks up on keywords like weather and today, and then starts figuring out how to respond. But let's dig a little deeper. After the chatbot grabs those keywords, the first thing it does is break down your sentence into smaller parts, a process called tokenization. Think of it as the chatbot chopping up your sentence into digestible pieces like weather and today. Once it has those tokens, it needs to encode them into a format the computer can understand. This is where things get a little mathematical. Each word in your sentence is transformed into a vector, a string of numbers. Imagine each word as a dot on a map. Words that are similar in meaning, like weather and climate, will be close together on the map. Words that are unrelated, like weather and pizza, will be far apart. This transformation of words into vectors is done through a technique called word embedding. It helps the chatbot understand not just the words themselves, but also how they relate to other words in terms of meaning. Now, here comes the fun part, matching. The chatbot takes your question and compares it to potential answers in its database using something called cosine similarity. It's a fancy way of measuring how close two vectors are to each other. If two vectors are pointing in nearly the same direction, it means the chatbot thinks the question and the potential answer are similar. If they're pointing in opposite directions, well, the chatbot knows those two aren't a match. Let's break this down with an example. Suppose you ask, "What's the weather like today?" The chatbot transforms that question into a vector. It then compares this vector with a bunch of vectors representing possible answers like, "It's sunny today," or "It's raining," or even, "I don't have weather information." By calculating the cosine similarity, the chatbot can figure out which of these answers is most similar to your question. For instance, the cosine of the angle between "What's the weather like today?" and "It's sunny today" might be something like 0.9, pretty close to 1, which means it's a strong match. On the other hand, the cosine similarity between your question and "I don't have weather information" might be something like 0.3, pretty far off. Based on this calculation, the chatbot will choose the best match for your question. But this matching system is just the start. Chatbots like ChatGPT go a step further by learning from their interactions with you. You might be wondering how exactly a chatbot learns. Let's stick with our cafe example. Say you go to the same cafe every day and order the same iced coffee. Over time, the barista gets to know you and starts preparing your coffee as soon as you walk in the door. They don't need to ask what you want because they've learned from your previous orders. Chatbots work similarly, thanks to machine learning. When a chatbot is first built, it's like a student that's crammed a bunch of textbooks, millions of examples of questions and answers. But over time, as more people interact with it, the chatbot starts to recognize patterns. If it gets a similar question multiple times and learns that one particular answer is correct, it will get better at choosing that answer in the future. And if it makes mistakes, feedback helps it adjust and improve, just like a student learning from corrections. A chatbot's learning process is driven by massive data sets and advanced algorithms. One key method that powers this is deep learning, which mimics the way our brains work using artificial neural networks. Each time the chatbot gets a question, that question is passed through layers of neurons. Not real ones, of course, but virtual ones. Each layer of neurons is responsible for processing a different aspect of the question. Maybe one layer looks at the words you used, while another layer considers the overall tone of your message. By the time the question reaches the final layer, the chatbot has built up a detailed understanding of what you're asking and can generate a response that feels thoughtful and relevant. For instance, when you ask ChatGPT a question, it doesn't just look at the immediate question, it also considers everything you've said before in the conversation. This allows it to respond more intelligently by understanding the context of the conversation. It's like talking to a friend who remembers everything you've said and uses that memory to give better answers. Now, let's talk about Gemini. Gemini takes things even further by learning in real time. Imagine walking into the cafe, and every time you slightly adjust your order, one day it's iced coffee, the next it's a cappuccino, the barista keeps track of your preferences and starts to predict what you'll want even before you say it. Gemini is designed to not only respond to what you're asking in the moment, but also adapt its responses based on what you might want next. It's not just reacting, it's anticipating. So, let's summarize. Chatbots started with simple scripts like ELIZA, evolved into sophisticated AI-driven models like ChatGPT and Gemini, and now they're capable of understanding not just words, but the meaning behind them. They break down sentences into tokens, turn those words into vectors, compare them mathematically using cosine similarity, and finally they learn from their interactions to give you more accurate and context-aware responses over time. The next time you chat with a bot, whether it's to ask about the weather, order a product, or even just to have some fun, remember that there's a whole lot of math, learning, and technology working behind the scenes to make that conversation as seamless and intelligent as possible. That's all for today's episode of Tech 101. I hope you found this deep dive into the world of chatbots as fascinating as I did. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time as we continue exploring the incredible technologies shaping our world.